Hello, welcome to Wuji Aptech's Innovation That Matters. My name is Rich Solid. I'm the Senior Advisor for Strategic Initiatives and lead the Boston office for Wuji Aptech. And today, we have the privilege to discuss rare disease drug development with Niels Svenstrup. He's the Senior Vice President of Development at Cydan, a rare disease accelerator directed towards the development of treatments for rare genetic disorders. Welcome, Niels.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, the industry has given considerable focus for rare diseases in recent years. What do you see are the driving factors towards this?
Yeah, this has been interesting. So I believe it's a combination of three things, really, namely the medical need, the scientific approach, and the potential for value creation in rare diseases. So starting with the medical need, Cydan is focused on the monogenic rare diseases that typically manifest themselves in early childhood. So we're talking about pediatric diseases with typically no available medical therapies. And I don't know what would be more motivating than that. But also in terms of the scientific approach in the monogenic rare diseases, there's a good understanding of the underlying genetic lesion that causes the disease, and the way that that lesion is imprinted into a protein that then causes the phenotype of the disease in the patient. So there's a very good understanding of the underlying etiology of the disease. And then finally, in terms of the value creation, I think in the last couple of years, it's become abundantly clear that there's actually real value to be created in rare disease drugs, either independently or as part of a portfolio. And I think what you need to consider is that some of these therapies are disease modifying and transformative to the patients that receive them.
So Cydan's accelerator is a disease agnostic model. It's unique in the industry and spun out 3 companies to date. That includes Vitesse, which actually was sold to Secampo. Then Imara was launched in 2016 to develop IMR 687 for sickle cell disease. Then Tiburio. Now, from your experiences, are there advantages in that model in delivering candidate molecules and drugs faster than more traditional approaches?
Yeah, so before answering that, maybe I can just highlight what I see as as some key information about the big pharma R&D strategy. In big pharma, typically you're moving a portfolio of many different drugs at various different development stages, and you have sort of those projects competing for the same resources. And in the end, the strongest projects survive and the weakest ones go under. And it's a healthy process because it makes sure at any given point in time that the portfolio actually puts resources into the strongest projects. And the major advantage of the single asset companies that we've created is actually the fact that they're able to focus absolutely laser sharp on pushing just one project forward, and doing that by giving it all the available resources and all the time. And the speed that you can achieve in a company like that is actually quite impressive. So in terms of the companies that we've created, I'm very proud of Imara for the work that they've done in sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. And this is 2 large indications with a great medical need. I have a lot of confidence in the team there and their ability to bring the drug to the market. So I'm observing that with a lot of interest.
What have you seen in terms of impact with this model? Again, it's disease agnostic, and it's the goal here is clearly to move things faster. Can you highlight some of the impact that the model's had so far?
Yeah, so I think without mentioning too many numbers, I think most people that we've talked to have been really impressed with the way that Imara has been able to bring a compound from preclinical really candidate nomination stage into late phase 2 development in a very short time. So it absolutely relies on the team having the eyes on the ball and focusing on developing that lead asset without getting too distracted by other things. But as you can see with Imara, I think it's impressive that they've been able to do that and take the company public during a time that frankly has been challenging for most of us. So there's a big shout out to them and to Rahul Balal, the CEO, who I think is doing a smashing job.
And how has collaborative relationships shaped success in the rare disease space and for Cydan and then the industry in general?
Yeah, so that's actually something that is quite close to my heart. Cydan is a small company. We're virtual and have a very small team, so we wouldn't be able to exist if it wasn't for collaborative relationships. Many people think about the collaborations that we have with academic groups, and they've certainly been important, as have the ones that we have with the rare disease patient organizations. But it's also, Cydan's also equally relying on collaborations with CROs and CMOs for our manufacturing, our testing, and even for clinical trial operations. So we're absolutely depending on our collaborators. And one of the great things about being a virtual organization is that you can turn to whoever in the industry you perceive to be either the technology leader or the leader in whatever discipline it is. So you're always working with the best of the best. And that I think is another advantage compared to having to home grow all of these kinds of expertises in-house.
And you use WuXi, as I understand, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We have had a collaboration for a long, long time, and we are working both with WuXi AppTec and STA.
Thank you. So the drug modalities are rapidly evolving, particularly in rare diseases. And look at the fact that we have small molecules, there's biologics, and there's gene and cell therapies. Now, what kind of challenges does this present to you as in drug development?
Yes. So on the one hand, of course, the new modalities and the new technologies offer new opportunities, both in non-rare, but certainly in rare indications. But on the other hand, small companies like Cydan often have a challenge accessing that key technology early on the development curve. Take oligonucleotides as a case in point. A couple of years ago, there was a real bottleneck with regards to manufacturing capacity. And so typically the small companies like Cydan would have a hard time just getting slotted in for manufacturing of an oligo. But fortunately, as time develops and the technology becomes more and more mature, it goes from a niche technology that's dominated by a few minor players to something that's much more of a commodity. We're also seeing the same thing basically at the moment with the manufacturing of viral vectors for gene therapy. It's also been an issue that has slowed us down a little bit. But fortunately, the capacity is expanding, and Cydan and other smaller players are able to take advantage of that technology.
Drug development is pretty complex when it comes to rare diseases with respect to regulatory, clinical development, and patients. Regulatory side, on the regulatory and clinical side, it might be very tough to help define endpoints on these patients, for example. So how is the industry responded to the challenges?
Yeah, again, so that's a good question. I don't want to complain too much, because part of what you're mentioning there, like the clinical plans and the regulatory path, is both an advantage, but also certainly sometimes a disadvantage in terms of approvable endpoints and things like that. And yes, the number of patients is absolutely low, which is making it complicated to recruit for your clinical trials. But on the other hand, in certain rare indications, you're actually able to get approval for a drug with clinical trials with very few patients compared to in the non-rare indications. And the reason for that, of course, is that those patients are more homogeneous and respond better if you have a real transformative design therapy that is disease modifying. So that part of it is great. One thing that's often overlooked is the challenge of doing rare disease CMC, which sounds a little bit critical, but CMC is a technical area that doesn't really scale down well in terms of the costs. So what it means is that the manufacturing of a lot of drug substance or drug product costs pretty much the same for a small lot as it does for a large one, apart obviously from the raw material costs. And you have basically the same costs for release testing, the same costs for stability, and absolutely also the same costs for process validation in the end. So the CMC part of a rare disease project can take up quite a large part of the budget, and there's no really good approach to try to counter that apart from developing a highly efficient process to counteract the expenses that you're encountering. And I think in the industry, one of the things that people would love to see from the FDA would be a proposal for an approval process that relies not so much on validation of the manufacturing process, but perhaps more on more extensive testing of the drug and stricter specifications on the release testing. Eventually, you'll probably be able to move the validation into a post-approval process. So I think that would be a useful and very helpful thing for rare disease companies to have access to something like that.
So when you talk about technology, to assist here, how come these technology advancements address challenges and gaps that you see in drug development?
Yeah, so the thing that we are mostly looking forward to in rare diseases, I think, is the point where genomics becomes so easy and cheap to do that you can do population genomics in order to better understand the epidemiology of many of the ultra-rare diseases. In many of these cases, because of mis- or underdiagnosis, we really don't know how many patients there are in the first place. And doing a population genomic sequencing would allow us to make a much more qualified guess at how many patients there are in each individual indication like that. Another area of technology that I'm looking at with a lot of interest is technologies to improve compliance, both in clinical studies, but also after approval. As we all know, if you don't take the drug, it's unlikely to work. And if patients on clinical trials stop taking the drug, you're messing with the signal in that particular trial. So it's important that it gets done. Whether that technology be something that is based on personal smart devices, or whether it's maybe in combination with new and more convenient dosage forms, both for oral and parenteral use, I think only time will tell. But I'm pretty sure that there's a revolution coming in that area as well.
So could you speculate on some of the future directions in rare disease drug development, maybe initiatives that you're working on or others that are going on in the industry with respect to rare disease?
Sure. So I think that we'll continue to see the funding of new platform companies based on technology as those particular hotspots arise in the industry and in academic research. But I also think that we'll see maybe a reverse engineering of some of the practices that have been pioneered in rare disease R&D being used in non-rare indications and in large pharma, simply because those principles are very useful in general, and hopefully based on a better understanding of the technologies and those principles, we'll be able to maybe break down some of the larger indications that are turning out to be really, really challenging to attack from a traditional drug R&D perspective, things like Alzheimer's disease or schizophrenia, and break them down into smaller, better understood and more manageable sub-indications that can be targeted by drugs that are targeting those specific biologies that are underlying the phenotype in those patients. So that's certainly what I'm hoping to see.
Hey, thanks. I'd like to wrap up the interview by thanking Niels for sharing his perspectives on the development of therapies for the rare genetic disorders. I also want to thank our viewers who have taken time to listen to the interview. We hope that topics that we discuss here are of interest to you. The Innovation That Matters series is an ongoing forum for discussing key issues and advances in our industry, as industry executives and key opinion leaders share their insights in seeking solutions to bring transformative medicines to patients. Thank you all and have a great day. We look forward to seeing you in our next Innovation That Matters segment. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rich.